Portal. One of the biggest games of our generation, and its impact is undeniable. From memes to quotes, and of course, memories. These games are possibly some of the best I have ever played. With the creative puzzles, hilarious writing, memorable characters, a very original idea, and of course, the massive amounts of memes. The cake is a lie. But let's take a look at the whole series to find out why it's so great. The game originally started as a senior game project by some students attending DigiPen Institute of Technology. These students called themselves Nuclear Monkey Software, and the game was titled Narbacular Drop. It was a fairly simple game where the player can place portals on walls and ceilings in order to solve puzzles. The concept was unique enough to catch the attention of Valve president Gabe Newell.
Lord Gaben himself!
And he hired the team to turn their concept into a full game using the Source engine. Thus, the game Portal was developed and packaged as part of the Orange Box in 2007. Now that we know the history, let's actually talk about the story of Portal.
We start with the main character Shell, waking up from an Aperture Science stasis bed and being spoken to by our guide for this game, GLaDOS, which stands for Genetic Lifeform and Disk Operating System. She instructs us on what to do as we progress through each of the test chambers. One of the test chambers even includes a cube with hearts, called the Companion Cube, which we'll come back to later. A lot of GLaDOS' dialogue feels very off, and hinting that something isn't right here. However, we continue through the tests until the last chamber, where she tries to kill the player by sending you into a pit of fire, which is very rude if I say so myself. From this point on, it becomes her mission to kill GLaDOS and escape the facility. Through traversing the back areas of the facility, we eventually make our way to GLaDOS' chamber, and a core falls off. We incinerate the core only to find out it was GLaDOS' morality, and she immediately tries to kill us with a deadly neurotoxin.
You're kidding me. Did you just stuff that Aperture Science thing, we don't know what it does, into an Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator? That has got to be the dumbest thing that... Whoa. Good news. I figured out what that thing you just incinerated did. It was a morality core they installed after I flooded the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin to make me stop flooding the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin. So get comfortable while I warm up the neurotoxin emitters.
We use the rocket turret to shoot her and knock the other cores off so we can incinerate them, and then we win. As the facility explodes, we open our eyes to see the surface, before being dragged back into the facility, with our future unclear. Until Portal 2.
Thank you for assuming the party escort submission position.
The first room is a great introduction to the concept of portals. showing you looking at yourself so that you understand where you've travelled from and where you are now in comparison. Moving on to the first chamber, it introduces the concept of buttons and boxes and how they work together effectively. The game then experiments with the concept by using buttons and boxes with portals. Then the game expands on this by giving you the portal gun but only being able to place blue portals. Then the game gives you a few chambers with these concepts gradually getting harder, then it introduces energy balls and experiments with that, and so on and so forth for every concept in the game. What I'm trying to say is, Portal has excellent pacing. Each chamber is designed to teach the player something new, or to expand on a previous idea with a new variation. The fling is a very important part of the game, not only because it's used in the final boss fight, but also because it teaches the player about momentum. As GLaDOS puts it,
Speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out.
all of these concepts are slowly introduced up until you reach the escape section, at which point the game tests all of your skills, plus adding in navigation skills, due to the fact that you're not in the test chambers anymore. Navigating the backrooms of Aperture Science is a bit more difficult than the chambers. Nothing is clearly labelled as to where you should go, but the environment is designed in such a way that it naturally guides you to certain places or to look at certain details. Portal walls are not as explicit as before, but you can still tell what can and cannot be used as a portal surface. The final tests are with the turret section and the rocket turret. The rocket turret is explained to you in a simple way so that you understand its behaviours. Portal does this a lot, as eventually everything you learned will be put to the test. And then you reach GLaDOS. I'll be honest, this fight is a bit of a letdown. It's been built up that GLaDOS is the enemy to take down and she barely puts up any sort of fight. And the excuse that this is a puzzle game doesn't hold up, because the next game has a better version of this boss fight in Wheatley. However, I will cut it some slack for being the first boss fight in the series, and say that it is at least unique when compared to other boss fights. It's also amazing at utilising every mechanic the game has taught you. The incinerator from the companion cube chamber is used, the rocket turret is used, the fling manoeuvre is used, and timed buttons are used. All mechanics learned through different parts of your adventure, thus wasting no part of what you've played up until this point. Portal 2 also does this excellently, but we'll get to that later. One of the best parts of this game is its soundtrack. The songs are all ambient pieces that convey the mood of the game or that particular scene perfectly, and Kelly Bailey did a fantastic job. Here's just a few of the pieces to let you get a feel for this game's incredible scoring. I want to quickly talk about my favourite chamber in the game, number 17. In this chamber you are given a cube, like many other chambers, but this particular cube has hearts on it. This is the companion cube. The chamber is not only a test of puzzle solving, but also about the effects of isolation on the mind. The whole concept of it is that if isolated for long enough, people will begin to feel an emotional attachment to anything, even inanimate objects. Thus, the companion cube. It helps you up, it protects you from energy balls, it holds the door open for you, and you begin to care about your little hexahedron friend. The cube is also implied to be sentient in some way, perhaps someone inside the cube. This is also backed up by the achievement you get when the cube is incinerated, fratricide, which is defined as the act of killing your brother or sister. The cube took on a whole life of its own in the community, as the experiment turned out to be a success. We cared about a box. Let that sink in. One of the gaming community's favourite things from any game is a box with hearts on it. Truly insightful. Portal 1 is a fantastic game. Gameplay, pacing and story are superb. The game even has a lot of examples of environmental storytelling, namely the Ratman dens. These are left behind by a man known as Doug Ratman, and show some really messed up imagery and exposing some of the lies about aperture science. The game also links itself to the Half-Life series by including a few references to Black Mesa. This wasn't always intentional, but more of a result of having to reuse some of the assets from Half-Life 2. But I think it makes the story of Portal even more interesting, knowing what's happening outside while Chell is taking down GLaDOS. But the ending of the game left one lingering question in the minds of fans. What happened to Chell at the end of the game? We see her being dragged back into the facility, but what happened after that? Labyrinth was a comic made to bridge the gap between Portal 1 and 2, showing what happened to Chell directly after we blacked out at the end of the first game. Turns out we were saved by an Aperture Science employee called Doug Ratman. The comic shows him putting Chell into a relaxation chamber to sleep indefinitely, before crawling into a stasis bed himself and falling asleep. This is a decent comic that I recommend you read to get some extra world building if you love the Portal world. Plus it gives some extra context to the beginning of the next game. But now let's move on to the sequel that everyone has been waiting for.